Jai Hind, dear students. I am Dr. Preeti Mittal, and today we are going to revise the chapter Tissues. Tissues are a group of cells combining together to perform a similar function together are known as tissues. For example, if we consider that conduction of water and minerals in the plants, then four types of cells are involved together to perform this transportation of water. So these four cells together will be called as a tissue. Similarly, in human beings, blood is a tissue. So that performs the function of transportation. So a group of cells performing a same function is known as tissues. In If you observe in unicellular organisms like amoeba, they just have a single cell, and that single cell is performing all the functions like digestion, excretion, everything is performed by the single cell only. But in animals, but in higher organisms, in all multicellular organisms, tissues are required. Why we require tissues? Because our body needs to perform many functions, and we have to divide the labor among different group of cells. That is the tissues. That is why for division of labor, for providing mechanical support, for all these functions, so that the functions are performed in a very well organized way, we require some tissues. In this class, we are going to just consider about the plant tissues. So let's start with that. So first we'll see how we will classifying the tissues. The tissues will be basically classified as meristematic tissues and permanent tissues. What are meristematic tissues? Meristematic tissues are fast growing tissues. So they will be present in the areas where the growth needs to be really very fast. Okay? So that will be helping the plant to grow. So the meristematic tissues will be further classified into three types based on the part of the plant where they are present. That is apical meristematic tissues, intercalary meristematic tissues, lateral meristematic tissues. These are the three types of meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissues are very fast growing tissues. They are going to grow very fast. Okay, so they are especially responsible for the growth of the plants. Now, where the growth of the plant is required? When the plant starts growing, then the shoot tip and the root tip needs to grow, and this shoot tip and root tip will be growing under the effect of apical meristematic tissues. Apical refers to apex. So the tip of the plant, that is the shoot tip or the root tip, will be having the apical meristematic tissues. Second area where the plant needs to grow is, it shouldn't only grow in height. The plant should be growing its branches as well. Okay, so this distance, this areas where the branches are emerging out, these are known as nodes. So the intercalary meristematic tissues are present in the nodal areas, and they help to increase the growth of these nodes and formation of branches. Okay, so branching formation will be there under the effect of intercalary meristematic tissue. Is it okay for a plant to just grow in height only and not have its lateral growth? No. A plant should have increase in its girth also. Girth means its thickness, its width needs to be increased, because if it's a young plant, it's having very thin stem. But if it's going into a tree, then that lateral growth should be there, and that is supported by lateral meristematic tissues. Lateral meristematic tissues are present at the sides of the plants. Okay, so both the sides of the plants, the tissues that are present, that are helping it to grow sidewards, grow fatter, that is the lateral meristematic tissues. What is the general feature about the meristematic tissues? I'll just erase this off. What is the general feature about the meristematic tissues? These meristematic tissues are very fast growing tissues. So they are not differentiated from each other. They just look all alike, and they are very closely packed to each other. They are fast growing cells, and they are very close to each other, and they are just having a very thin cell wall. that is made up of cellulose. So the cells are having a very thin cell wall that is made up of cellulose. Apart from that, they have a prominent nucleus. So they are going to have a big nucleus. They are recently formed cells. Just they are formed. You know, they are like newborn babies. Okay, so they are going to have just like newborn babies have very thin skin. Similarly, they are also having a very thin cell wall that is made up of cellulose. They have a prominent nucleus. They have a dense cytoplasm, because in the cytoplasm all the cell organelles are recently formed. So it's a dense cytoplasm. A prominent nucleus could be seen. Apart from that, they don't have a vacuole. Why they don't have a vacuole? Because vacuole is meant for storing of the waste, and they are just form cells. They don't have any waste in them. So at this stage of the growth of the cells, they don't have any waste and so don't require any vacuole. So these cells do not have vacuole. So what they have? Thin cell wall, prominent nucleus, prominent cytoplasm, but no vacuole. Okay, so that is about the meristematic tissues. Now, as the cell plant grows, these meristematic tissues are going to grow into different types. From these meristematic tissues, only different type of tissues will be formed. For example, if you are all fast growing students, you are all like meristematic tissues. But from you all only, some of you are going to become doctors, some are going to become engineers, some are going to become CA, IAS, RAS. So you are going to be getting different from each other. So this process of becoming different from each other is known as differentiation, and that leads to formation of new type of tissues. So these meristematic tissues also are going to be different from each other. They will be developing into different tissues, and they will be forming the permanent tissues. This differentiation word comes from different. So becoming different from each other, they will be developing into permanent tissues. Now, what are the types of permanent tissues? The permanent tissues are simply classified as simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissues. Now, simple permanent tissues means that all the cells in that particular tissue are performing the same function. If all the cells in a particular tissue are performing the same function, that is known as simple permanent tissue, and all the cells are alike also. Okay, so in a tissue, if all the cells are same, then they are known as simple permanent tissue. But in a tissue, if different types of cells are there, okay, sometimes you are during your annual function, you are having like from different classes, different students come up and they do that particular function. Okay, they perform something in common. So when different types of cells are there and they perform the same function, then that is known as complex permanent tissue. Complex permanent tissue will be having different types of cells. Okay, so we will dealing with that. First we'll have a look at simple permanent tissues. Simple permanent tissues comprises of mainly three types of tissues. They are parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. Okay, one by one we are going to see about them in detail. First, the parenchyma. Parenchyma are the living cells, and these cells are unspecialized, not very much differentiated from each other. Just from the meristematic tissues they have been formed and formed into parenchyma tissues, but they are not very well specialized, and they are not very different from each other. They look alike. All the parenchymatous tissue will be looking approximately the same with each other, and they usually have a thin cell wall. So if you see that they have a very thin cell wall. Okay, then apart from that, they are living cells and they have a large intercellular space between them. Meristematic tissues were very compact. They were not having much space between them. But now they start having moving away from each other, and so the parenchyma tissues are having a lot of intercellular space between them. So they are not very closely packed to each other. Okay, and they store the food. They are the place where the plant is going to store the food. So, actually, when you are eating an apple or a potato, you are mainly consuming the parenchyma tissues of that. Okay, isn't that interesting? Now, apart from that, parenchyma tissues sometimes have chlorophyll in them that gives the green color to the leaves. So, if the parenchyma tissues are having chlorophyll in them, then they are known as chlorenchyma. I didn't wrote here because I was not having enough space here. So, if the parenchyma tissues are having chlorophyll in them, chlorophyll is the green pigment of the leaves that helps in the process of photosynthesis. So, if they are having this chlorophyll, then they will be known as chlorenchyma. Okay. Apart from that, in floating plants, especially the aquatic plants that are floating, like lotus, water hyacinth is there, these parenchyma cells are sometimes having air spaces between them that helps the plant to float, and then they are known as parenchyma. So if parenchyma cells have air spaces between them, then they are called as parenchyma. Okay, I hope that is clear to you all. Next, move on to chlorenchyma. Chlorenchyma is specially present at the stalk of the leaves. Okay, you can see the stalk. So the stalk of the leaf that is mainly having the chlorenchyma. This chlorenchyma provides flexible strength to the plant. Flexible strength means the plant can even bend when it's windy, but it's not going to break. So it will be providing the flexibility so that the plant can bend and without getting broken off. Okay, bending without breaking, that will be provided by the chlorenchyma. These chlorenchyma cells are also living cells only, and they provide mechanical strength to the plant. Okay, the mechanical strength of the plant that it shouldn't break, that will be provided by the chlorine by the collenchyma. Okay, chlorenchyma was a type of parenchyma only, but this is collenchyma. Okay, it provides mechanical support. Apart from that, in tendrils, what are tendrils? You must have seen that when they are climbers, they just have a tendril that encircle itself around any of the supports. Okay, so creepers, climbers, they all have tendrils to cling around the support. Okay, जिसको हम हिंदी में बेल कहते हैं. So that is having the collenchyma tissues in that. Apart from that, they are having irregular thickness at the corners. If you observe the cells of collenchyma, then at the corners they are having irregular thickness. The middle part will not be that much thick, but the corners of the cells are elongated and the corners of the cells are thick. Why they are thick? So that they are very continuous to the other cells. They are not having much intercellular space and they are closely packed, and so that could provide mechanical strength to the plant. For that reason, their thickness is there around the corners. Okay, they are still having the deposition of cellulose only. They are having the cell wall made up of cellulose only, but that is thick at the corners. That increases the strength of these cells. So they are very closely packed to each other and they can easily be together, so that to provide the mechanical strength to the plant. And they have very little intercellular space. Okay, because if they are close together, they won't be they will be providing that support to the plant. Okay, the next type of plant is sclerenchyma. These sclerenchyma are not living cells, they are the dead cells, and they are very hard, very stiff cells. Okay, so you must have seen the husk of coconut or the peanuts have a outer covering. Apart from that, all seeds have a seed coat. So that seed coat is made up of sclerenchyma cells, which are going to provide the mechanical strength to that. Okay, that is going to provide the strength to that type of plant part, but that is the dead cells, that is made up of dead cells. Okay, then they are also present around the vascular bundle. The vascular bundle is there in the plants. We'll talk about more about vascular bundle. What is it? So these cells are present around the vascular bundle also, providing the strength and support to the plant. Next, their cell wall is lignified. What is lignified cell wall? There is a substance known as lignin. A chemical substance is there that makes the plant cells very hard. So that is known as lignin. So their cell wall is not made up of cellulose, but it is made up of lignin, and this lignin makes it very hard. Okay, and sometimes the cell wall is so thick that there is no space inside the cell only. Okay, so it's just like, imagine a room that is having so thick walls that there is no space inside the room. Okay, so it's just the case of sclerenchyma, which is having such a thick cell wall that in fact there is no space, sometimes there is no space inside the cell. Okay, and that that is all about the sclerenchyma tissues. Okay, I'll just shift aside, you can take a screenshot, and then we'll continue with complex permanent tissues, that is xylem and phloem. Apart from that, we'll also see about the protective tissue, that is epidermis. But before that, I need to erase whatever is written on the board. Okay, so that I can have some space to write about these. Apart from that, apart from these permanent tissues, the plants also have some protective tissues. And this protective tissue is epidermis of the plants. So, we'll talk about the epidermis of the plant. We have a protective covering of the skin around our body. That is also made up of epidermis cells. Okay. Similarly, the plants also have a topmost covering all around it, around the roots, around the stem, around the leaves. Every part of the plant is covered with an outer covering that is known as epidermis. Okay, so this outermost layer of epidermis is the protective tissues in the plants. Now, these cells are usually, like for example, if you see the epidermal cells, they are usually flat cells, which are usually very thick from the top and from the sides, but usually thin from the under levels. Okay, so the upper surface that is in contact with the atmosphere, and that is usually thick, and the inner layer of that epidermal cells is usually thin. These epidermal cells are usually flat cells that are very closely packed to each other. That is a protective layer. So if some soldiers are there, they need to be continuously standing around the border, okay, to mark that nothing can enter into that plant here in case of epidermis. So they are very closely packed to each other. There is no space between them, and the cells are usually the flat cells. Some of the cells in the epidermis are modified, and there is some spaces in the epidermal cells, and that space is known as stomata. So at some places there is a gap between the epidermal cells, and that gap is known as stomata. Especially in case of leaves, you all know that stomata is present especially on the under surface of the leaves. Okay, so if this is the leaf, so that is the upper surface, and here is the under surface. So if you closely observe the under surface of a leaf under a microscope, we'll find that it contains some small pores for the exchange of gases, and these pores are known as stomata. These stomata are surrounded by some kidney-shaped cells. You can see the kidney-shaped cells. Okay, so these kidney-shaped cells are known as guard cells. These are the guard cells. These two guard cells are there, and between these two guard cells there is a pore, there is a space, and that space is known as stomata. Stomata is required for the exchange of gases by the plants. So the plant need to have the exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide with atmosphere, that is done through this stomata. Apart from that, excess water from this plant is also going out of the plant through the stomata only. Okay, so the stomata provide the space for the diffusion of gases and for the transpiration of water, that is evaporation of water from the surface of the leaves. This layer of epidermis is sometimes surrounded with a waxy coating also, especially in fruiting plants. It's very important. So waxy coating is sometimes there around this epidermis, and that provides its protection against water. Okay, so with all, what all things are being protected to the plants, what kind of protection is given to the plants by this epidermis? This epidermis is going to protect the plant against wind, against water, and against invasion of fungus or any infective organisms. So that will be forming a line of defense and not allowing any fungus to enter into the plant. Okay, similar to the function performed by our skin. This epidermis layer only later on, when the plant is going to grow, this epidermis, for example, if we talk about the plant that has grown very big, a neem tree, a mango tree, you must have seen a layer of cork. A dead cells layer is there around that plant. So this cork is there, the dead cells that you can see around the stem of a neem plant or a mango tree, that is the cork. So this cork is also formed from the epidermal cells only. The epidermal cells could be providing support or probiotic protection to a small plant only. But in case of tall trees, this epidermis is insufficient provide that protection. So in that case, the protection will be provided by the cork. Okay, and this cork is also from secondary meristem. Remember that, can come as a 1 marks question. Okay, so what is cork? Cork is formed from the secondary meristem of the plants. Okay, secondary meristem is there, that is going to form the cork. Okay, so that is all about the protective tissue, epidermis. And sometimes a layer of waxy coating is there, that is known as cuticle, that will be providing the water resistance to the plant. This layer is especially important in desert plants because they need to have water resistance, they need not evaporate the water, so that is maintained by this waxy layer. Okay, now we have the last part of the plant section, that is complex permanent tissues, xylem and phloem. Okay, so now let's have a look about xylem. Xylem is a complex permanent tissue. I told you complex permanent tissues means that these tissues are formed from more number of cells. Different types of cells are there and they perform a same function, then they are known as complex permanent tissue. So this xylem is also made up of different types of cells, and these cells are tracheids, vessels, xylem fiber, and xylem parenchyma. So these four types of cells are there and they together combine to form the xylem. Okay, these tracheids, vessels and xylem fiber, these three are dead cells that are forming the xylem. And xylem parenchyma, like every other parenchyma, it is the living cells. Okay, now what is tracheids and vessels? Tracheids and vessels are the long tubular cells. Tracheids and vessels are the long tubular cells through which water will be conducted. So long tube like cells are there, and they are joined end to end so that the water could be conducted through them. Xylem, as you know, that helps in the transportation of water and minerals from the roots to the higher parts of the plants, to each and every part of the plant. So this xylem is made up of tracheids and vessels that are in the tube-like structures. Apart from that, xylem fiber provides support to this tube-like structure. So tracheids and vessels are there, and they will be surrounded by xylem fiber that will be providing the mechanical support to them. Apart from that, xylem parenchyma is also there. Xylem parenchyma, like every other parenchyma, is going to store the food. So the food storage will be there in the xylem parenchyma also. Fine. Now come to the next complex permanent tissue, that is phloem. This phloem helps in the transportation of food, hormones in the plants. The transportation of food and hormones will be done by the phloem. Now, when we talk about phloem, it is made up of 5 types of cells. These are the sieve cells. Do you know the meaning of sieve? Sieve cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma, and phloem fiber. Out of all these cells, sieve tubes, companion cells, and phloem parenchyma are living, and phloem fiber is dead. So remember, phloem fiber is the only dead cell in plant in case of phloem, and xylem fiber was the xylem parenchyma was the only living cell in xylem. Xylem has mainly dead cells, and phloem mainly has living cells. Okay, they are getting a lot of food now, that is why they are all living. Bichare xylem wale mar gaye bina bhook ke, bina food ke. Okay, so sieve cells, sieve tubes. Sieve word suggests that it is a perforated cells. Sieve word means chalni. Okay, so chalni means that is having small pores, small gaps. So sieve cells are also having these are the perforated cells. Perforated means they are having small holes in them. Okay, so these sieve tubes are arranged one after the other, and they are having small holes, and these sieve tubes are in the tube like structure surrounded by the companion cells. The companion cells are there around the sieve tubes. Then phloem parenchyma, like every other parenchyma, that is going to store the food, and phloem fiber is going to provide the mechanical support. Okay, these xylem and phloem together form the vascular bundle of the cell of the plant. So when you talk about vascular bundle, that is made up of xylem and phloem. Where can you see this vascular bundle? If you observe a leaf that is having the midrib and the veins, okay, sorry, my left leaf fell. So this midrib, the veins of the leaves, you can see the veins of the leaves. So that is all having the vascular bundle. That is the xylem and phloem. Okay. So that is about the complex permanent tissues of the plants. That's all about all the plant tissues. In the next class, we are going to see about the animal tissues. That's all for today. Good day, everyone. Have a nice day.